The radio clock says 1 minute. 1 minute. Is it not on? Testing, testing. Are we ready, Ken? Well, lovely to see everybody here at Halifax. Thank you for sale in what you presented to us earlier. Very grateful for the amazing things you were able to tell us about. And it's quite amazing in, 2 years? We can produce a film of that sort of quality. I find it really quite amazing. Quite touching as well. I've seen it 3 or 4 times now, and each time I see it, I shed a tear or two. Yes, they do want the gospel, and we want to teach them, don't we? So at Halifax, we have a programme which is set out for the next hour and a half. And we're going to commence with Brother David Coleman giving us a first slot, looking at last year, looking at the headlines of 2019 and the help that the CALS can offer and give. Brother David, please.
There's a lot of you. Good afternoon. Headlines, not political headlines, headlines of what's happened within the ALS branch and its activities in the last 12 months or so. That's a map of the branch area. Sorry, it's not very large or very clear, but it's quite an extensive region. Morpeth in the top, Sheffield in the bottom, Cleethorpes on the east, and Halifax. I think we're about as far west as we can go with the Cleeses, with Halifax tonight. Used to be Sowerby Bridge when I first was branch secretary, but that's a long time ago. So, the red dots, well, let's have a look at the first slide. Am I pressing the right one? So that's the northeast branch. There are 27 ecclesias. They all were originally marked with a pink dot, and then the 13 with Iranian contacts, I put a gold spot over it. So that's the composition of ecclesias in the northeast. Baptisms last year, we saw the figure nationally. There was about 140 in the northeast. Tony's used the word amazing several times already. I had it down to use it again, so I will. Amazing, that after all the time, effort, and money that has been put into preaching since, say, World War II, there's been barely a tickle of response, and not many baptisms. Most of our baptisms have been from family and so on. And if we were to talk in business terms, we could say, at the moment, our spending is very cost effective. But we don't talk in business terms. The Father has sent these people to us to learn the truth, and we're doing our best to fulfill that objective which is ours, that command which is ours. And we who were once slowly dwindling are now increasing. We heard that, was it Rochdale have 50% or more members who are Iranians now? So we're getting replaced as we fall off the edge, as it were. Translate that if you can. Amongst those 13 ecclesias who have contacts, there's at least 20 classes a week going on. And the numbers in those classes vary from 15 at least minimum up to 40 plus. Even, how many was it in Liverpool? Mind you, that's not the northeast, that's the northwest. Can't be precise with those numbers. There's constant change in people as they move around, constant change in who's looking after them and so on. How much help can we give in running those classes? Mainly, we give for transport, as Andrew Fenner indicated, translation, printing, but some also for loaves and fishes. The amount in last year was around 17,000, and we budgeted for next year about 30,000. And that is about, on a national scale, our budget is about a third of the total national scale. So we're sharing the proceeds that we have usefully, I hope, in this part of the world. What else have we done? The Bible Today exhibition has been used 4 times. There's a Farsi translation of all the panel texts available. And recently we distributed copies of the Bible message calendars to all our contacts. And I've still got some in the boot if anybody wants any more. We might ask, what is ALS? I've described it there as sort of a Robin Hood syndrome. We take from those with plenty and give it to those who are short. We don't go around with bows and arrows trying to extract the funds, but the funds come in and we distribute those to where they are needed. Sort of recycling as well. I would say that if you are looking for support and help, again, as Andrew Fenner indicated, you come to the branch, either the treasurer, preferably the treasurer because he hands out the money, but also useful if I know as well. There's no fixed rates or anything like that. We talk to ecclesias who are wanting help and decide how much help they need and how we can support that. It might be 0, or it might be 100%. So, thinking about integration, it would be useful, and we would be happy to look at telling groups who are coming to an understanding of the truth a bit more about the structure of our brotherhood, about the inter-ecclesial organisations there are, and so on, to help them. So if you want some information or want a seminar on that, again, please let me know. Finally, a plug for our branch phone conference. We don't have delegate meetings in live these days, but we do have phone conferences, and we've scheduled the next one for the 17th of February. I'll send out details of that shortly with an appropriate agenda. It'd be useful for as many people, particularly those ecclesias who have classes, who have contacts, to join in that, so we can share our experiences and help one another as we approach new things that we have to do with our time and with our activities. And finally, Andrew told you about the newsletter, which is produced monthly in the Northwest. We also have one in the Northeast. I send it out at the moment to about 150 brothers and sisters. If you don't get it and would like one, please let me know. Thank you.
Thank you, David. We now have another section where we want to deal with new contacts. Of course, our visitors are coming to us by various means, mainly through the hostels and even local hotels. And eventually, by God's guidance, they make their way to us. So we're pleased to welcome them. We're pleased to deal with their situation and help in the teaching of the gospel message. So we have three presentations that we're going to have now. The first one is looking at a teaching approach, and Sister Cynthia Miles is going to come and give us her thoughts on that, please.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. It's really good to see you all, and hello to all those at Sale as well. We have the hostel in Wakefield where there's no ecclesia, and it holds over 400 people of every nationality on the planet. Our classes have been running now for nearly 2 years in Wakefield, twice a week, and along with a number of other brethren and sisters, we've been teaching classes there to people who know nothing and to people who are almost ready to be baptised. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the process of the teaching and learning. As you can see, teaching while preaching, I don't know if you can see underneath, but it says actually it's all about the learning, not the teaching. And one of the things I want to make really clear is that teaching people who speak a different language to you or have a different nationality or culture is exactly the same as teaching children in school or adults in university. The teaching practices that you need are exactly the same. Age doesn't matter, language doesn't matter, and to a certain extent, numbers don't matter. Although the more you've got, different techniques are needed. So, this is my take on teaching and learning, gained after over 40 years in the education profession. The whole basis of teaching and learning is relationships. You can't have one without the other. If you don't communicate with your learners, you won't build a relationship with them. And if you don't build a relationship with them, you're not going to teach them effectively. So, you have to make sure that they are learning. That's how they're going to understand the gospel. That's how they're going to learn it. That's how they're going to respond to it. So you've got to communicate. And how do you do that? Well, when they walk in the room, go and give them a handshake. Smile. Say hello. Doesn't matter what language you do it in. but make them feel welcome and at home. And then if you're going to learn, you've got to have a certain amount of basic equipment. My apologies to anybody who's listening to me who's been in the education profession. I'm probably trying to teach my grandparents to suck eggs. Ensure that they're able to learn. Make sure they've got a Bible in the appropriate language. The ALS are very good at helping out with that. Make sure they've got a notebook or some paper, and make sure they've got a pen. I lose more pens in a month than you can imagine. And the next thing, and probably the most important thing I would say when you're teaching at whatever level, is that you must plan. If you just think you know that topic and walk in, then you're going to find that you've got problems. Teaching is not about telling what you know. And if you take nothing else away from me today, I would say two things, and this is one of them. You are not helping people to learn by telling them what you know. Because they do is hear what you say. That doesn't mean to say they've understood it. That doesn't mean to say they can memorize it. So it's not about telling what you know. It's about making sure that they are learning. Before you decide anything else in your planning, work out what your learners are going to leave your session knowing and understanding. And the best practice is to have just 3 points. The possibility of them taking away much more than 3 main points is slim. And the other thing you need to do is to try and plan for the sorts of questions that will tell you what they've learned and about what your responses are going to be. Now, all the trainee teachers I've ever had through my hands, the hardest thing is to take a question not being sure of what the question is going to be and what your response is going to be. That's a very hard thing to do, but it's something you have to be ready for. So plan some questions. Plan what you think the answers might be and be prepared for the unexpected answers and how you would respond to unexpected answers. So planning, 3 main points. Make sure you've included some questioning because the answers to questions that you ask tell you how much has been learned and understood. Okay. Now, this is my other and second main point and my hobby horse. Christadelphians are brilliant at information overload. We pile mounds and mounds of stuff into our talks, umpteen hundreds of quotations. I can remember one brother being at least one every 30 seconds for a half an hour. How on earth he thought we were going to find them, never mind remember them. You can't do that. And we can't do that with people who are not speaking our language because it takes them so much longer to find the place. So limit what you give. Make it skeletal. You can always add to it another time. And just one factual bit of information. Of all that you say in a half an hour, they will remember between 5 and 10%. And only then when you've repeated it 3 or 4 times. If I stopped now and said, tell me what you know, what I've said, some of you would struggle already. Possibly because I'm talking too fast. But if you have a fact or a detail that to you is so important, think, do you really need that? Because if in doubt, leave it out. They don't need every detail of Jewish history or every aspect of Paul's letters or an interpretation of prophecy at the beginning. They need the skeleton of the gospel. And if you go back to what they agreed in the letter of the Jewish church in Jerusalem in the 1st century, and you look at the skeleton of what Paul and Peter give in their letters, it's actually very short and very concise, and that's what we need to be. Limit your use of biblical quotations. 3 in half an hour is plenty. And this must be news to a number of speaking brethren who would feel that they hadn't got anything to say. Well, think about it, because they're not learning from all that information overload. Teaching techniques, well, they're personal. I've always been a bit of a drama queen in the classroom, and not everybody's like me, and that's fair enough. Some people are much more quiet and considered. But use your personality to get the learners on your side, in whatever way that works for you. Because that's where the relationship and the communication that I began with meet. Use short personal stories. Short, I said. Okay, and analogies that the learner will relate to. And don't ramble on. It's boring for them, it's boring for you, it doesn't achieve anything except fill too much time. Questions are good even if you don't know the answer. Always be asking questions if you possibly can. And be prepared to wait for the answers, up to a minute. And this also frightens people who make public presentations. They're terrified of silence. But silence is where people are doing the thinking, where they're working out what to say to you and whether they dare say it. So make sure that you give them time to work out the answer. And if they ask you a question you can't answer, say so. There's no humiliation in saying, I don't know, let's find out together. So don't be afraid of not knowing the answer to something, because that's a good way, again, of communicating and building a relationship with your learner. Silence is golden. Make sure that they've understood. Ask open questions. Don't test their memories. You don't know the kings of Israel in order categorical. I don't know that. Why would we expect people to be able to memorize a whole series of facts? And if they can memorize it, all it tells you is that they have memorized it. It doesn't tell you that they've understood it or understood the meaning of it. So think very carefully about the way you ask a question. We're not here to test memory. We're here to help people learn understanding and to try and make an assessment of where their hearts and their minds are. And I give you some examples there of the way that you might ask that sort of questions. Visuals, PowerPoints and all the rest, I'm really in favour of. I think they're very useful. They concentrate the mind of the learner, gives them something to look at just as you're looking at it now. And it helps them to fix in their memory. You remember more from visual than just from audio. So use the visuals, and if you've got the technical skills, use music. Use bits of film. There's all sorts of ways of adding things in that will help the person learning the gospel to be able to understand and remember what they've been taught. And finally, be passionate and enthusiastic about it. Because if you're not, why would they be? Learning the gospel is not a miserable business. And I know we Brits are very stitched up, you know, and we don't express our emotions particularly easily. But you can smile, you can say, I think that's great news, because we've got the best gospel in the world to share. And we've got to make sure that the people that we share it with are able to understand and respond to it. Well, that's all I want to say about that. I would say this. I have got a handout. I was going to give it to Ken, but I haven't done for various reasons. If you want a copy of a summary of that, if you write me an email, or I will arrange to get it so that it can go on the website with the other bits and pieces. So if anybody wants a handout summarising what I've said, it will be there. One other thing while I'm here on this platform, you will know that we have a large number of contacts in Wakefield. We can have anything up to 55 turn up to a class. We've got to the stage where we cannot get anything like even half of them, into our meeting. So tomorrow, the meeting is going to Wakefield tomorrow afternoon, and we're going to hold a service of hymns. It will be a breaking of bread without the emblems. There will be hymns, readings, exhortation, so that contacts who we cannot get into our meeting room can experience the gospel and experience us as a community. David, I know, has put a note out about this for me, but can I make a plea, particularly to people here? If you can possibly come along to the Lightwave Centre in Wakefield at 3 o'clock tomorrow afternoon, we really would appreciate your help and support. These are people who are desperate for the gospel. They are very frustrated because we can't get them into a meeting room. And so we're taking the meeting to them. So if you're at all possible to come to Lightwaves, I've got the postcode, it's on the newsletter, at 3 o'clock tomorrow afternoon, we really would appreciate your support so that the gospel can be seen in our lives to those to whom we're trying to teach. Thank you.
Thank you, Cynthia. I just happen to have a copy with me, actually, of the email that went out earlier in the week on the appeal for Wakefield. If anybody wants any information on that later on, if you see me or Cynthia or anybody from Doncaster, we'll be pleased to pass it on. Telling the hard facts. Brother Chris, please. Might just have to wait a moment while Ken's doing a bit of a...
So what do I do to get my presentation? Press the button? Or something else? Technology. I used to work in IT as well.
That one?
No?
That one?
Yep.
There you go.
We've broken it, fantastic. Telling the hard facts anyway, without the technology. The cold, hard facts is what it's talking about. Apparently I'm really tactful and really diplomatic. Oh, sorry, no, they said I wasn't. That's why they gave me this subject. So welcome to a bit of reality for whether you're Persian or English, different points of view, but this could be a bit close to home. People arrive in different ways. One kayaked across or more. One arrived by helicopter. In fact, he didn't. There was 3 or 4 of them. I thought, that's posh. It was rescue helicopter. So it's not the way you think. So we've met a number of people in hotels because the hostels are full. They've got flip-flops on their feet. They've got shorts on and a T-shirt on. They have lost everything else completely because they were winched up in a helicopter and everything else went down with the boat. You're talking about some of the poorest people you'll ever meet, and they all need our help. And they expect a welcome. They actually get a go away in many ways from you, from the government, from normal people, or even some Christadelphians, dare I say. So think about that at times, maybe. You know, do you get a happy welcome like Darren's face, or do you get a grumpy one like mine? Think about what you portray. Since you told us to be enthusiastic, even I try. But this is the real problem. The aim is to create here in Britain a really hostile environment for illegal migration. Mrs. Theresa May in 2015 said that as the Home Office Minister. The idea is to get the message back to people from any countries not to come to England. Go to Sweden, go to Germany, go to France, because England's horrible. That's what they were trying to do, and that's what they're still trying to do. That's why this system isn't that friendly to you, quite simply, and I've explained that to others in the past. This is the hostel. The top there, on the left, that was breakfast. Jam, butter and white bread. This is then the next 2 meals of the day. Some more white bread and something unidentified and a banana, and an attempt at some kind of hamburger and some chips. That's 3 meals in a day at a hostel. So anyone staying in a hotel has got away lightly because they're not staying and getting that. The other should be a video, but it won't play on the technology. But that video will show you the quarters for a married couple in the hostel. And in there you'll find bunk beds. One tiny little bedside cabinet and an open rack to hang a few clothes on. A married couple has to live like that for anywhere up to 2, 3, 4 months in a hostel. So then we get to Bible study. And I'm really unsubtle, as you all know. We have this, the CBM 40 lessons. 300 pages of information that we think is the minimum as Christadelphians to understand. Cynthia's told you maybe about her opinions on some of that. And that's the Farsi version. But it takes about 4 months to get through that. Then we run a pre-baptism course in Bradford between 3 and 5 weeks usually, of an hour and a half or more each time, when someone asks us for that course. We have an interview that takes 2 or more hours and eventually can lead to baptism. And then it's the start of the rest of their lives. It's not the end point, it's just the beginning, because this is where you've got to work on that thing called continuous improvement and improve your characters and read Galatians 5 and see where you're up to, and then read Galatians 5 again and see where you're up to, and keep repeating this to find out what you need to do to improve. That takes 4, 5, 6 months to do. And in that time, they're waiting for this big fancy interview, aren't they? Well, the alternative, if you don't want to do all that 6 months, is what I do tell people, is you can go to another church. You can turn up 2, 3 times. They might talk for about 10 minutes each time in a language you don't understand without translation, and then you can get baptized. And I've used quotes because they usually throw some water at you or something, I'm not quite sure what. But then you can ask for a certificate of baptism. Your Christianity's sorted for anyone who's claimed Christianity as the reason. So then you can just relax and chill and, I'll have a rest now. And, it doesn't matter. I've got it. I've got tick in the box to show the man when I get to the Home Office for the interview. And that's the choice. And I am a bit cruel and a bit upfront, and I do explain you can either spend 4 or more months learning about the Bible properly with us, or go somewhere else and just do what you want to do because you don't really believe. And I think you think that's a terrible thing to say, but I think if you say it in the right way, they understand what you're saying, and the odd one that is there just for the tick in the box will quietly disappear and not come back. But you'll see. This is about finances. This is just so you understand a little bit. £37 and a bit to live on when you're in the housing that's provided by the Home Office. That's while you're waiting. But then you look at what you've got to do in the 28 days you're given, because you're going to get kicked out of that house because you've now got permission to stay, and it's in panic mode that you go, and you can get so much money for your housing and so much money to live on, and it's still not a lot. But I'm not going to go through all this now, but you definitely won't be buying a car, I'm afraid, lads, for a long time, because you can't afford the insurance, even if someone gave you the car. So you need to get a house near a train and near a bus station, because that's the way to get to the work. And you've got other financial issues, like if you're doing little jobs and working for yourself, you need an accountant like Yvonne, who's now retired, so you can't have Yvonne that's like Yvonne. Find someone else, and you have to pay them to do your accounts, because working for yourself is expensive and complicated. If you start doing cash-in-hand jobs and people aren't paying tax for you, 1, it's illegal, 2, it's immoral, but it means that employer can then blackmail you into keep doing it, because he's going, but you've been doing it, I can prove you've been doing it, so you can carry on washing up for cheap rates. So don't get involved with people who are not paying the proper rates and proper tax, because you get caught in a cycle then and you end up in the black economy, as they call it. Gym memberships. Oh, can you get me a gym membership? Yes, but you need to get a pay-as-you-go one that you pay each time you turn up. You can't sign up for something for hundreds of pounds for a year and they have to move on in 2 months' time. What are you going to do with a gym membership then? And don't forget, there's a 5-year review at the end of all of this. So they want to check that you've been a good citizen and you've paid your taxes and you've carried on being a Christian, because that's what you claim was the reason you can't go back. It isn't about passing it once, it's about what happens in 4.5 to 5 years' time after you've passed. It's got to be thought about properly. And there's a programme called Location, Location, Location. As I mentioned, towards the end of it, when you've got leave to remain, it's more like eviction, eviction, eviction. They want you out that house. You have no rights. You will be thrown out on the day they say. And then you think, why are they all in Bradford? Why are they all in Liverpool? Why are they all in Rochdale? Why are they all in parts of Leeds or Middlesbrough or Newcastle? Because it's cheap. Because the companies that are providing these houses pay very little money to rent the houses, and they pick the cheapest areas and the poorest areas, and often places where we've got small meetings. And yes, they pick areas where religion is a problem, being a Christian, because you're not welcome. And the streets of London, by the way, are not paved with gold, and you're better staying in the area that you're in. So if it hurts you, you've still got to say that you love Halifax, you love Bradford, you love Huddersfield, or wherever, because then there's some kind of responsibility for the local authority to house you within those 28 days. If you get on your way with your little stick and your bag and be Dick Whittington, as if I explain as an English person, looking for those paved streets of gold, it's not going to happen. But if you follow the system, then you've got a new house to furnish, and you'll need help with that. Housing to find, and then you need things like flight costs for family to bring them over. They're all things we have to think about and how we help with it. All in this fantastic 28 days. And you don't get 28 days because it takes them a week to write to you, so you get 21 days. And then the solicitor doesn't give you your card, you've got 14 days. And it gets a bit hairy. So I've got about 12 Iranians I can see in front of me, most to attend our classes. We have 4 rules in our classes, and that's what I want to finish with. So, the Iranians in the room, what's rule 1? Come on, what's rule 1? Come on, louder. Okay, so what's rule 2? They're embarrassing me here. So rules... Thank you. I can't even find it on there. I told you I didn't like technology.
And 5, enjoy your life.
So that's Farzad, who's a member here, and he's right, seriously, to control behaviours and everything. Love God, love everyone else. Read the Bible, but actually check in the Bible what someone said. If they've said it up here, look it up and see if they're right, and they're not telling you lies, if you like. You know, you must check every reference that's ever quoted. And then the 4th one is learn English or wash up forever. I've finished.
Thank you, Chris. Well, we're certainly getting a lot of practical information being passed on to us, aren't we, as we think about the things that are being said. You recall the things that Brother Phil Baston was talking about in Sale earlier on, in dealing with the help and assistance that can be given through this process of getting their asylum. Well, other things need to be done in that process. I don't think a lot has been said about. Are we okay, Ken? Yeah. All right. Do you want me to continue?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Sorry about that, slight technical hitch. But there are other things that we need to be fully aware of, because there's welfare, there's registration and various other things that need to be done. So in that regard, Brother David Hanson is going to come forward and give us some practical advice in that area. Brother David, please.
Good afternoon, everybody. So Brother Phil mentioned earlier on briefly about the background of the asylum process, and I don't wish to sort of go through that again, but one very important point he mentioned was the PIQ, Preliminary Information Questionnaire. Very, very important, this, because it's a starting point to get to know your individual, to get to know the new person being housed in your community. It'll tell you their date of birth. It'll give you their name, the correct spelling of their name. Sometimes people come into the community and they give us nicknames, which are good, but in the long term they're not very helpful, particularly when the process progresses to interview stage. It tells you the date of birth. It tells you from where they come from. It also tells you what the reason is why they have come into this country. And as we are providing Christian faith and promoting the gospel message, it gives us a starting point as to where to start. One thing I would actually say, we must not be at any stage, we must never ever be judges of character at all. We've got to accept people for what they are and what they say they are, because we've had people through Wakefield and through Leeds who have come here claiming asylum based on political reasons, and they've stumbled across the gospel message, and guess what? They've actually ended up being converted, being baptized. In other instances, they've gone away and we've sown a seed. We don't know whether that will germinate or not, but we feel we can walk away feeling at least we've done our job of spreading the gospel message as taught by the Lord Jesus. So we think in terms of, we have a new asylum seeker housed in the locality. We need to make contact with them. We can do that either by the phone, or we can make a visit to them to find out what their housing is like and what their personal needs may be within that house, and also to try and find out and establish who are they sharing the house with. Are they other Christians? Are they Iraqi Muslims? Are they Iranians? It'll just give us a feel for who they are and what they've got to contend with. It also gives us an ideal opportunity to be actually teach the gospel message through love, demonstrating love to new people who've arrived here with nothing. The next thing is, on a personal point, I always try and sort of establish what our beliefs are and form a basic understanding to differentiate, explain how we are differ from other mainstream evangelical religions. This is very important, and we can gauge what their response to that is as to how we progress that. The next point is to tell them where their local ecclesia is and to give them times, etc., and to make arrangements with them as to when we will next meet, and to explain the evenings we have Bible study. Now, some of these people may have come from the hostel. It's good to know which hostel they've come from, because we will need to know when it comes to the interview stage, where we need information to be able to support their case, if indeed they're claiming asylum based on religion and Christianity. The next thing is to explain the doctors. They need to register at the doctors. Now, Brother Phil has already taken us through the asylum process. When they are determined to be housed and to be given asylum assistance, They are given assistance also. The NHS, rather, is notified of an application for an NHS number. And also at that stage, they apply for an HC2 certificate, which will then give them exemption from any medical costs. Very important. I'll come back to that in a moment. So if we take them to the doctors, or explain where they go to the doctors and what process they need to go through. And they will have to fill out 2 forms. One is a registration in NHS registration, which will give basic information. And then there'll be another questionnaire there that they'll need to fill in, telling them about their own personal details, any medication they may be on, family history, etc. Then, after they've done that, they will get a letter from the doctors confirming their NHS number and their registration, and usually they'll receive this within 7 days or so. Once they have that, they can then register at a dentist. And here presents a problem, because there are very few NHS dentists taking on new patients throughout the country. So it's advisable always to pre-plan and try and establish a little personal list as to what dentists are willing to take on new people, new patients. To go to the dentist, they will need again to fill out a form with the NHS number, and some dentists are actually specifying at this stage that they want to see the HC2 certificate. And there's a simple reason for that, because without that, they won't get paid. So others dentists, it's not a stipulation by the NHS. They could actually, if the local dentist doesn't stipulate this, then it's a good idea to maybe find a dentist, register, and pre-book an appointment for 4 weeks or 8 weeks ahead. But the HC2 certificate should come within 14 days or so of them arriving in their new home. Now, it should do, but it doesn't always do. Sometimes it can take longer. If that is the case, then we need to give them help filling out an HC1 certificate that is fairly straightforward, because most of the boxes are across by it, but it'd be rather daunting to the asylum seeker, because it's all in a foreign language, and some of the questions can appear to be rather difficult. So we've established now that they've arrived. We've helped them with the doctors. The other thing is that if they don't speak the language, as Chris just mentioned, we need to encourage them to learn the language. And there are 1 or 2 apps out there that are very, very helpful. There's one there called Fun Easy Learn. There are 6,000 word vocabulary, but they are giving them 1,000 words free. It's interactive, so it's child's play, and it is they do have a Persian edition. And in the same series also, they have a Fun Easy Learn with phrases, common phrases, and they have access to 1,000 free phrases. Very good. But I had an instance just a short while ago where they'd been with us for 6 months, they can't speak any English at all, and I calculated it out. I said, you need to be spending 2 hours a day, at least 2 hours a day, learning the language. And when I calculated, it'd been with us for 6 months, which equated to 28 weeks, and at 2 hours a day, I think I worked it out to 192 hours. Now, 192 hours, most people would be able to learn the language quickly. And just to confirm that, there's one gentleman who is now a brother who came to this country about 4 months ago. He couldn't speak any English at all, but he was very intuitive, and within 3 months you can have a telephone conversation with him on the phone. And it's a good conversation, a two-way conversation, so it can be done. And I think it's 5 o'clock and just coming up to, and I think that will wrap it up. Thank you.
Thank you, Brother David. Well, you can see all the time we're getting more and more information being fed out to us. Things that we ought to know. and ways and means that we can all, in some measure, help. We're going to continue now. We're going on to another topic. It's one that's been discussed quite a bit at the moment throughout the Brotherhood. I think comments have been made in the Christadelphian magazine and certainly in the weekly newsletter that's put out. And that's looking at integration into the Brotherhood. And so we're going to have a few minutes now on integration. We're going to have an English viewpoint and we're going to have a Persian viewpoint. And firstly, our brother Tim Day is going to come onto the platform and give us an English viewpoint. Brother Tim, please.
Good afternoon, everyone, wherever you are. I've enjoyed listening to all that I've heard so far, though I am feeling slightly threatened by Cynthia's presentation because I feel I've definitely got more than 3 points. So I'm just thinking as to which can kind of go, really. What I did just jot down, which adds to my points, a second ago, was that God is in all of this. And clearly we're sharing information, and that's valuable, and we're doing it for a purpose. And we mustn't forget that we are all on a journey together, and I'm sure we all believe in that we shall make mistakes, we shall develop, we shall learn, but God is in this. And when you think about the journeys that we've listened to, and some of the hardships that we've gone through, often when we are talking about some of the things that we read in the Bible, and we're talking about the difficulties that were shared in that first century, we know that they've got a lot more experience of those things than we ever have. We assimilate and we think and we imagine, and they've genuinely experienced. So they have, come on a massive journey of faith, and we are also on a journey of faith, and God is in this. So that's my first point. We're thinking about integration, and that's a two-way process, isn't it? It's not just thinking, we're integrating them, into UK ecclesia, UK life. We are integrating into their lives as well. And I'm sure that in Middlesbrough, and I speak because of all my experiences at Middlesbrough and all the experiences we've had there, that we have learnt from them because they have come with a culture, and there are things there that our families have learnt from them in this process. Just to set a context for some of my comments, just so you have an idea of perhaps what the work that we've been involved in. Our first contacts arrived in 2018. Things grew from that point rapidly. 2019, we had over 30 individuals that we were supporting. We're, as an ecclesia, we're only in our teens in terms of brothers and sisters. Numbers, perhaps, of our ecclesia was in the 20s. We're now gone back into the 30s, but Iranian contacts was about 30 plus, and now because some unbaptized have left, gone for work to other places, and one or two have gone to London to try to walk the streets there, but mainly to Manchester. Numbers have dropped off now to about 20, 25. And we get top teens to our classes each week. Middlesbrough, we've had 14 baptised. God willing, we've got 4 more being baptised this Thursday, which means the larger proportion are now our brothers and sisters, and not all of those, only a few of those have gone away. So we really have to think now, one of our next parts of our integration is just thinking, actually the balance of our ecclesia is 50-50, and we've got to think about that in terms of particularly our memorial service, which is a shared service in some way, but non-English speaking brothers and sisters go out and have a parallel service, and then they'll come back in for the breaking of bread, and they'll be involved in the beginning of the service, the breaking of bread, the actual sharing of the bread and wine, and they'll be involved in the closing of that service. But I can see, as I say, we're on a journey. I can see that we're going to have to rethink shortly, because we ought to be incorporating them more and more into that most central part of our week. We do encourage them to read. We do encourage them to say prayers, and that's something I think which makes them feel that they are genuinely contributing to the service. That's a little bit of background. Now, we know that the problem is language, and we know how effective Babel is, and this side of the Lord, coming and as having that kind of ability, or simply there being one language, we are going to have to deal with this problem. We're trying at Middlesbrough. We are running an English class, and that contributes to the classes that they're involved in. I was impressed by David's figures, and clearly that spoke from the heart is true. Maybe that individual was sharp, good academic, because I've seen those at the other end of the scale who clearly struggle and won't make that kind of progress. I would say from a point of view of language and their growth in language that the fact that we've been able to contribute to their learning outside our ecclesia, those that go to college, and I've been here for long enough to book into the colleges and progress their language there, the fact that we're doing it on the and as an ecclesial thing means that they understand that we care about their English, we care about the practical things, we know about that, and that's moving forward. And one of the big things is in all learning processes, like as Cynthia says, it's enthusiasm. It's the way in which you kind of encourage them. It's the driving along and sharing a conversation. I had a young man say to me a few days ago, he loves to gain a new phrase. And he says, "Hi, Tim, I'm in the pink." I said... And I kind of almost, kind of drove into something and smiled and he said to me, he smiles, he's waiting for the praise, and he said to me, "Next year, perfect English." And I said, "Maybe not, but your English is really coming on and we can really communicate." And this is just after 6 months. And he shows me his book and he's working hard at it. He works hard faithfully as his homework, which is a joy. And if we can break down that kind of English barrier, the more we do so, the more we shall come together. Now, that was point one, Cynthia. Here's point two. What works for an ecclesia, I think works for people. When you think about an ecclesia, you have babies down there, and we have our senior citizens probably also sitting down there as well, but, we have a big spread of ages. The thing that binds us together is the commonality of our faith. We wouldn't come together. The diversity of kinds that come into ecclesia wouldn't come together if it wasn't for our faith. And we know that an ecclesia that's truly together is because we work in integration. We're working at the way in which we can learn about one another's lives. If we're going to bear one another's burdens, it's because we understand one another's burdens. And we believe in those, and we're trying to do something about it, isn't it? And them ours. So it's about, truly being a family. Now, we know that these are things that we've always had to work at. They're not things that we don't know about. And my simple motto is like, the more we can do together, the better. It doesn't matter what it is, apart from it being a positive, seemly thing in the sight of Christ, in the sight of God, but the more we can do together, the better. So them being involved in the more we can do with them, the better. We shall make them feel that they belong, and we shall find common ground. They struggle with our language, but they have got all the commonality. They've all got 2 arms and legs. They've all got humour. All the things that we enjoy, they enjoy as well. They all enjoy eating. We do a lot of eating at Middlesbrough, and it's clearly, and they do a lot of cooking for us as well. So, that's a sharing of different cultures. And these are the things that kind of bring us together. Now, I've put down here a few points I think are things that you would think of yourself. So they're not as if they're not new, but just 1 or 2 things to kind of just to remind us of. Ecclesial membership. We are members of the Middlesbrough Ecclesia, in front of members of many ecclesias. You're a member of that ecclesia. You have, because of that, you might have, a little something. It could be, at Middlesbrough, you would have a pigeonhole, where all your papers get shoved in. Well, soon as we need some more pigeonholes at Middlesbrough. It's another thing on the to-do list, as it were. You can't do them all at once, because, brethren and sisters have keys to the ecclesia. You may be barred from various countries, etc., but you've just entered into the waters of baptism. You're now a member of a family. You have as much right to be in this ecclesial hall as I have. Here are your ecclesial keys. Really? Do you mean during the week, Tim, I can come in here and make a cup? Of course you can. If you live closer to this ecclesia than I do, so why don't you use it, Well, that makes them feel as if we trust implicitly and they're responsible, and then they can access that. The ecclesial programme, their name's on it now, and their address is on it, whatever they've got in terms of contact details, and they're in this ecclesial list. And I recently did this 6 months programme and gave it out to all our members, and there were some of our Iranian brethren weren't there. And when I caught up and remembered 3 weeks later that I'd still got this programme and gave it to this young brother, he immediately, his English is poor, and he quoted the date that he was due to serve back to me before I even gave him the programme. The communication process there meant that his own Iranian-speaking brothers who had a programme had spotted his name, covered his back, told him what he was doing, and it was lodged there. But it was the way in which he told me which realised how much it had meant to him, because he knew that he got a job to do. Now, he won't be able to do that job, really, like an English brother can, because, if you serve him for the day, it's about greeting, isn't it? Meeting and all the things that go in. But there are certain things that he can do. And provided he's got somebody, a UK brother, watching his back, acting as a buddy for him, he can be meant to feel that he's doing the bits that he can do. And that means a certain sense of duty and pride and ecclesial support and all the good things about belonging. So I think our ecclesial membership and the service that our brotherhood does in recording their baptisms, giving them the Christadelphium, showing their name in print, etc., just shows that actually this baptism here has had some reactions, and not just from your ecclesia, but from the extended family, and that's very real. Another point I've got down here is preaching. Language is a problem. We know that. But actually, their legs work just like ours do, and they can do a lot of preaching with body language, with helping, preparing. We had a Teesside campaign last August. By far, the largest supporters of our campaign were our Iranian brothers and sisters or interested friends. And we were feeding over 30 a day for the week, and very quickly, a lot of those meals were kind of starting to be prepared by young Iranian lads who are really good in the kitchen. And our sisters skillfully kind of negotiated their plans with their plans and allowed them to have their days, etc. And of course they were able to contribute, offer, feel that they were really supporting. And at the end of the week, which was the Bible campaign, the translated panels, the Farsi focus, Farsi talks, English talks, etc. during the week. At the end of the week, there were a number of comments which said, I really feel that I have, felt very much part of the ecclesia this week. And we'd spent all day with them and all week with them. And that's something you can't repeat all the time, but when you get the opportunity, I would strongly advise it. Care for young and old. They may not be able to speak fluently, but you can go and smile and you can accompany somebody, and they have volunteered because they know of those that need care within the ecclesia, and people who have visited and have volunteered to join those situations. And again, that's just something to share in, and they feel that they can really contribute. Social events, we've had a number of kind of social events which are just, playing games. Music, games, food, reading, everybody can share in those things. And it's universal, isn't it? Playing a game and making a fool of yourself, everybody likes doing that. Well, no, not everybody. But certainly we've had a lot of fun with our social events, and we've gone on walks. We've got drowned at Redcar on the beach. By the time, nobody went in the sea, they didn't need to. By the time that we had established our camp and got the volleyball net set up and all the rest of it, and then that was it. It was clearly game over, and by the time we got it all down, everybody needed a change. We went back to the Ecclesial Hall to steam dry and to enjoy the rest of the day. They laughed, we laughed. But it's England. You don't go to the beach and expect not to get rained on. But these are the ways. These aren't new things. They're just things that you need to I would advise things you need to plan into your programs and bring them together. And we have a whole host, haven't we, all the ecclesias, we've seen that, of our preaching work, and it is clearly effective. But it is, if you like, all aspects of life that we need to try to tackle, and they have a lot of time on their hands, and these oases of opportunity and social events become, I think, quite important things to them in their week, helping them to get by. Care for our premises, ecclesial halls, our own homes and things, they are happy to contribute to that. They want to. They have got those practical skills, and they have taken initiatives at Middlesbrough in order to give us support with those things. I think I've just about done, but we have sat down with them and talked to them and asked for ideas. How are things going? Naturally, you'd expect that to happen. What do you think, about our studies or about, the organisation of things? They often ask for more information about the bigger picture, how each ecclesia, relates to another ecclesia, or how do the ecclesias relate, to the whole of the UK or to other parts of the world. So they're interested very much on how, explaining all our charities and all our teaching, both in the UK and abroad, and all the support systems that we have. So that's something, I think, which is, I think we're guilty at Middlesbrough of having a vacuum there and not filling it with the right information. It's something that, again, is on our to-do list to try to improve giving them the opportunity to understand those things. One idea that came out of one of their meetings was, that they wanted to give back. They are aware that they come, as has been described, with very little, and they're so grateful for the support they receive through the asylum process, through the teaching process, through the general process for looking after them and giving them support in their homes. They're aware that, and naturally there's a balance, isn't there? Or there's a sense of rightness in giving back, and they want to give back what they can. And they came up with the idea of actually, what are the things that you need doing in the ecclesia? How can we help? And we drafted up a list of things like, we could do with some maintenance in the hall, okay? We could do with some more support in visiting those who need visits. What else can you do? Well, there's brothers and sisters who are getting to the end, love their particular hobbies and things like this, gardening and things like this. Yes, we know about that. How can we help? Well, they don't find it so easy these days to be able to keep on top of it. We will put my name down for that one. We will go out and we will shift work quickly for them. We will wash cars and things like this. And this isn't, this is not kind of, demanding. These are practical things that they can actually use their time profitably, and these are occasions when they can just share our time, and despite the difficulty of language, they can begin to understand more of our lives and our understanding of theirs. Was that 3 points, Cynthia? That'll do for now. I'm sure if there's people who want to ask questions later on, I'll be very willing to carry on those conversations. Thank you.
I'll give you 3 points there, Brother Tim. Thank you. Well, Brother Tim's given us plenty to think about there in looking at things from an English viewpoint. But as Brother Tim mentioned, integration is a two-way thing. And so we have Sister Masuma from Milnes Bridge. She's going to come on the platform now and give us a Persian perspective.
سلام به همگی. امیدوارم که همگی خوب باشین. خیلی خوشحالم. افتخار این رو دارم که در خدمتتون هستم. Do you know Farsi? You seem confused. I guess most of you don't speak Farsi. And that is the biggest problem, communication. More than 90% of us arrive with little or no English. Our language were confused back in the time of the Tower of Babel, as brother said. And they continue to be a cause of confusion today. I thank you for the opportunity to speak for the first time in English about our lives here and as a member of Millen's Bridge. I have found the following verses from Colossians 3 to be most helpful. Therefore, as God's chosen people, holy and dearly loved, clothe yourself with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. Bear with each other and forgive one another. If any of you has a grievance against someone, forgive as the Lord forgave you. And overall, these virtues put on love, which bind them all together in perfect unity. My husband, my son, and I arrived in the UK in April 2019. We entered a completely foreign country where we knew no one, didn't know the laws and culture, with a dark view of our future and new life. No family, no friends to at least share our worries, sadness, and sorrows, or to help each other. Our first contact with the mainstream church was the one opposite of our hotel in London. My main memory was of an arrogant priest, full of pride, with special, very costly clothes. And speaking with him after the Easter service, he gave us a feeling of being unworthy. We were moved to Derby Hostel, and we made our first visit to the Christadelphians. We met Brother Jamie, and he didn't wear special costly clothes. We thought he wasn't an important member of the church. We discovered he was actually a very good teacher. 2 weeks later, we were moved to Huddersfield. In the first 2 days, we had contact from one of the church members. He and his wife were coming to visit our house to say welcome. We worried, will they be the important members of the church? Why are they coming? They came and our stress disappeared. And again, they were not important members. No special costly clothes, no pride, and full of kindness and humble. Then we met Martin, David, June, and others. But still we saw no one important with the special costly clothes. We wonder where the Pope was. Finally, we found we had entered into a special community that changed our imagination about the structure of a church. We found no need for special costly clothes, no proud behavior, no great or weird claims. Instead, it was possible to walk in God's way while carrying out important duties without special clothes or signs or important positions. Even if a person has lots of responsibility, their hearts should be full of love for their brethren and sisters and be responsible for sharing their problems to try to make them happy and their sorrow to pass away from their hearts. We saw people's conduct and their behavior encouraged us to learn more about God and His only begotten Son. Many of the immigrants have left behind dear family and good friends, and we never thought anyone would be so close to us again in the UK. But we found that the Christadelphians are a group that has completely changed our thought and attitude. We found a community not with special clothes, but with special hearts, who when we are happy, they are happy. When we are ill, they worry and try to help. When we have challenges and hardship, every one of them help us. They encourage us, hold our hands, and teach us how to walk in God's way. As we saw at the beginning, we are from two different countries, two very different cultures, two very different languages, and even different weather. As we saw, but joining the Christadelphians, we realized that we are all the same, and that really surprised us. The same feeling, same behavior, same belief in the one God. Same humanity, same goodness, and now I feel we are one. And I feel this deep in my heart. I have found everyone is precious, that we have Jesus as our high priest, and that an ecclesia is not a building. The ecclesia is made of brethren and sisters. It's made up of me and every one of you. I found everyone is necessary to ecclesia, and in 1 Corinthians, I read the ecclesia is a body, and it is not complete if it's missing one of us. We need to spend time with brethren and sisters when and where we can. May Jesus come back to the earth soon. May God strengthen all of us in the walk to the kingdom together. May He give to all of us a life of peace and calm in His kingdom. God bless all brothers and sisters. And thank you for the time that you give me and for listening to my essay.
Thank you, Sister Masuma. Thank you for those kind and encouraging words. It's wonderful, isn't it, how we can support one another in our common faith. Now then, we're going to move on to our final topic, and we're going to think now about how we can help. And to help us in our thinking here and our encouragement, Brother Jonathan Adams is going to talk about areas in need of support. Brother Jonathan.
Thank you, and merci, Sister Massey, for your talk. I wish she'd been at the end and not me at the end. I'll say Darood to those people who understand that. It's hopefully hello, salam. And thank you for asking me to close today. I was going to do a summary of all the talks as quickly as I could, but I realised there are probably more than 3 points per person, so I'm not going to do that even at all. So I rearranged things slightly. We'd be here till tomorrow. There's so much information. And that's what it is, really, isn't it? You've heard a lot of interesting things. You'll have increased your knowledge and understanding. That's great. That's often what we're good at. Increasing our knowledge and understanding of a subject, usually a faith-based matter, a biblical subject. But that, in some respects, as I think we've alluded to, is meaningless unless we translate that into action. And that, of course, has to be the best bit for us. What are we going to do with that knowledge? What are we going to do differently from what we've heard today? These issues that have never been experienced, at least I think so, in our community before, are impacting on our ecclesias now massively. Some ecclesias more than others, sure, but they're stretching the limited human resources to the limit. And the debate then is not for us to be talking about our articles of our statement of faith or the fundamentals of our belief or the manner of our worship, but it's about what we're going to do in action to continue our precious faith, to not just think about what financial resources can be raised for somebody else to spend, though that obviously is helpful. It's about what we're going to do now as a community of people, as a family. It's about what you and I can physically do to help a group of these people, these Iranians who are coming, mostly Iranians, are coming onto our doorstep and are searching for those faith-based answers, the good news of the gospel and the practical help that they need in this new country. And it's a confusing system, as we've heard. Now, I'm not going to quote anything from the scriptures. I'm sure you can think of many things to back up what I'm saying. We don't need to do this now. But let's go away from this place, perhaps have a real conversation now before we leave. And I think I will ask a couple of questions to you at the end and see what your response are. Have a real conversation with yourself and your own ecclesia, but perhaps more importantly with neighbouring ecclesias. Think about the areas of support you can give these individuals, these communities that are coming to us, who, again, as we've said, mostly arrive in the UK with nothing more than what they stand up in. What do they need from us? Yes, we can give them spiritual input by the bucketful. Conscious that we're not being translated today. So, but is it in the right format? It is in the right place and time. Is it appropriate to their needs now? Is it accessible? We've mentioned all these things. And what about their health and well-being, their social needs, their food and clothing, their need for good shelter and safety, their need for friendship, companionship and a sense of belonging, fellowship we call it. And of course we're seeing children come across as well, and some of them are now having children in this country. So what we're going to do about all that's coming onto our doorstep? Can we, as a community, provide all of that? Do we want to provide all of that? And yes, I hope we say yes, of course we do, and we are doing. So I ask you, as I close now, as I've asked myself many times over the last year or so, what is my priority in my daily life, my weekly life, my monthly commitments to these Iranian refugees, asylum seekers who are coming to my ecclesia in increasing numbers? But I say again, we need to talk about this. We need to see what responses we get. Do we know of an ecclesia nearby with many Iranian contacts when we don't have so many? And with our dwindling numbers of indigenous members, of course. What can we do differently? And I challenge people to think what we can do differently. Do we need all of the ecclesias in West Yorkshire, let's say, or the North East? Do we all need to have a weekly Bible class individually? Do we all need to have a certain type of Sunday talk, a Bible time? Could we not cancel the odd Bible class and do things jointly together as ecclesias that are locally based to specifically help out our Iranian contacts? Could we occasionally cancel our Sunday services and do things jointly together to improve our commitment to our Iranian contacts? We have a lot of people who are speaking these days, and we spend a lot of time travelling around the country, or the North East in particular. Could we do things differently there? And maybe we do need to think now to change the way we do things on a next stage, a next footing. We've met the demands so far as a community, but they're not going to go away. They're probably going to change as we start to integrate, as we've heard. And what has been so nice for me personally, and I'm sure I speak on behalf of Leeds Oakwood, is the really useful and uplifting and encouraging help that we've had from brethren and sisters across the North East patch. People who've come initially, they were helping us with a lot of transportation. They were giving talks and still do. They were leading services. They were doing Bible discussions and pre-baptism classes. And even now we're having people help us from other ecclesias at our weekly Iranian Bible class. But this has been done on an individual basis, and perhaps now, again, a challenge us to have more inter-ecclesial discussions to look at how we can do things differently. It may need a bit of thought, a bit of system change to accommodate the challenges that are before us now and in the future. We probably cannot stay the same. So I'm asking you now that you think as you leave here of what you can do to generate in terms of more spare time, more time to help with our Iranian contacts and our Iranian project, as we call it sometimes, to continue to support on a regular basis the Bible classes, the transportation, the pastoral needs, the care, the registration for doctors and dentists and the like, and just above all, as we've mentioned, the companionship that's required. So, as somebody was saying about riches, from rich to poor, as it were, in our relative ecclesial community and personal and family riches, which we have of time, expertise, companionship and fellowship with our families, let's try and redistribute some of those to those who have very little or very few riches when they come to this country, in some sense. So we do need literally now to practice what we've been preaching, and there are going to be no excuses. We need to show, as I think Tim mentioned, that we do care. We have been doing that. We can continue to care and integrate our Iranian brethren and sisters into our family until the Lord returns. And that's all I've got to say, but I thought I would, because I don't think there's a point on the programme, to ask if anybody has any questions about what we may have said this afternoon. I know Sale cannot join in with this because it's not a two-way thing, but does anybody have any burning questions that they'd like to ask me or anybody in the audience that's given a talk? Because I don't think there's any time for questions, are there? I'm looking for Tony. No, there's no time for that.
4 minutes.
4 minutes time, okay. Has anybody got a question they'd like to ask about anything that they really want to get off their chest or feel they want answering now, but for some of the expertise that's in the audience? And if not, if we've answered all those questions, that's great. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Jonathan, for your comments there. I had, in the process of the afternoon, been linked in with Sale and at Halifax here. Been making all sorts of notes, but I thought I'll just take Cynthia's advice and really just commit myself by saying that really, when we think about everything we've heard during the course of this afternoon, we're faced with a lovely challenge, aren't we? I was thinking of the word change earlier on, but I thought, no, we don't like that word in our community. So it's a challenge. So there's something for us all to do. We can all go back to our ecclesias and think about things, offer help and support in whatever way. There are many, many ways. And I'm sure by talking to one another and talking to our Iranian friends, there's lots of things we can do to help each other. I was reminded when our sister was speaking before, I was privileged to be at Millsbridge on the day your husband and son were received into fellowship. And I was pleased to be speaking that day, and it was nice to be able to give an exhortation and a lecture in English, but being translated into Farsi. It was a nice experience and something I particularly treasure. So, yes, we are faced with a challenge. And by God's grace, we should have the will and the capability of meeting that challenge. Because we don't know how many days, how many weeks, how many years before our Master will return. One day will be the last day, and the day after, he could be here. Who knows? Today might be the last day. We just don't know, do we? Well, we're going to conclude. Before I do, I'd like to just thank Sale for their contribution earlier on. We thoroughly enjoyed it here at Halifax, and I hope the things that have been sent across to you from here have been helpful and instructive, and that all of us together can meet the challenge that is set before us. So we're going to conclude our time together by reading a psalm. We're going to read together Psalm 96. And after I've read this psalm, Brother Peter Simpson is going to conclude our day in prayer, please. So Psalm 96. Oh, sing unto the Lord a new song. Sing unto the Lord all the earth. Sing unto the Lord, bless his name. Show forth his salvation from day to day. Declare his glory among the heathen, his wonders among all people. For the Lord is great and greatly to be praised. He is to be feared above all gods, for all the gods of the nations are idols. But the Lord made the heavens. Honour and majesty are before him. Strength and beauty are in his sanctuary. Give unto the Lord, O ye kindreds of the people. Give unto the Lord glory and strength. Give unto the Lord the glory due unto his name. Bring an offering and come into his courts. O worship the Lord in the beauty of holiness. Fear before him all the earth. Say among the heathen that the Lord reigneth. The world also shall be established, that it shall not be moved. He shall judge the people righteously. Let the heavens rejoice, and let the earth be glad. Let the sea roar and the fullness thereof. Let the field be joyful, and all that is therein. Then shall all the trees of the wood rejoice before the Lord, for he cometh to judge the earth. he shall judge the world with righteousness and the people with his truth. Brother Peter, to conclude in prayer, please.
Our dear Father in heaven, we thank you for our lives. We pray that we may be transformed by the renewing of our minds. And we pray especially that we may be joined together as one in unity to praise you. And that when our Lord returns, we may see him together and be like him. We ask for your blessing on us now as we leave and bring all our prayers and thanks to you in Jesus' name. Amen.
Before you go, I just have a couple of announcements. I didn't announce them before because they didn't really affect the other side of the Pennines. Firstly, just a reminder about 3 o'clock tomorrow afternoon at Wakefield. As Cynthia mentioned earlier on, there could be as many as 50, 55. I don't think you really know until we get there. That's right, yeah. So as many who can, who are able to, if you can make your way over to Wakefield, to the Lightwave Centre, and if anybody wants to know where it is, you can find the postcode, and hopefully your sat-nav will get you there. I haven't got a sat-nav, but fortunately I know where it is. I've been a few times. And the second announcement was regarding the North East ALS meeting that we're having. It's on the 17th of February. Brother Dave is going to send out a notice to all the ecclesias. But we really would. We'd love as many representatives from ecclesias to phone in and join with us on that occasion to discuss the things we've been thinking about together this afternoon, and also other things that we can do perhaps together within the confines of the ALS. So that's at it'll be around about 7:30 on the 17th of February, which is a Monday evening. In fact, I think last year at this time was the first of these particular get-togethers. And when I think back to how it started, there were 3 of us in your house who were talking about it. At that time, there were only a handful of Iranian visitors, and suddenly it exploded. And before we knew where we were, we have the lovely situation that we find ourselves in today. So when you get the notification, please give it serious thought. There's only 4 of us at the moment on the committee. 3 of us actually are not involved personally with Iranian visitors. We'd love to be, but we're not at present. But we try and get involved by travelling around and helping where possible. But the other point to mention about that is we'd love to have more members on the committee. So if anybody's young enough, we're getting a bit long in the tooth, so we'd love to have some young blood joining us and putting some more input into the work of the ALS. So thank you very much for your attendance, and thank you everybody that's contributed in whatever way. Thank you very much. Godspeed on your journey home.